Here we go. Welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us as always. It's always a pleasure to have Mr. Patrick Deakins on. He's a Justice of the Peace serving in Washington County. Patrick, how are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm awesome, Paul. What about yourself?
I'm feeling pretty good. So just generally, I mean, I follow what's going on in Washington County, specifically, with the jail overcrowding. That's what we talked about the last time. This idea that, there's a study being done on what to do, and maybe, I know you don't want to raise taxes. So are there any new developments in that?
No new developments there. We're still putting the study out for a proposal. I think that's just about ready to roll out. The county has all kinds of requirements that it has to fulfill to put out a contract like that and a bidding process, which are good. It adds transparency to the process, but it just adds a little bit of time to how that's all going. So, that's kind of where we're at. Other than that, we're just in the full throes of budget season for 2020, and that has been, in my opinion, an absolute circus. So that's what we're dealing with now.
Do you guys ever get any pressure or advice from, consultants that are encouraging you to raise the pay of county workers?
Well, the county contracts with a consultant that comes in, and basically what he does is, from what I understand, a top to bottom review of our pay, our compensation. So, right at the start of budget season, one of the committee meetings is personnel, and he came in, his name is Mr. Johansson, and he came in and he basically went over where, all the statistics of the county pay are, and he said that basically what he would recommend is a 3% raise across the board for everyone, which is kind of where, the county over the past few years, that's kind of where everything's fell, just an across the board 3% or an across the board 5% or something like that. So, it was pretty interesting presentation by him. I definitely got the feeling that he was an advocate for the raises of the employees.
Yeah.
Towards the end, he said he was basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, Paul. Somebody went back and looked at this presentation. I'm sure the exact statistics, but these are close enough for what we're going with. The overall raises at 3% would cost the county around $750,000 a year. And he says, well, we've essentially saved $700 by older employees have cycled out of this system. People that have been there longer term and have received more raises have cycled out. So we're hiring newer people, younger people for lower wages, and so we're saving money there. So we should give everyone a raise. So it's kind of that whole, you talk about it a lot in your program. Us that look at government talk a lot about it. We're saving money that we haven't spent yet. You know what I mean? We're lowering a budget. We're finding savings that don't really truly exist, dollar for dollar, if you will. So that's what's concerning about things like that.
Do you find there's always seems to be with local governments, they always try to keep up with each other. So whether it's the local sales tax rate, well, we need to have a sales tax rate that's like, Conway or like Fayetteville. That's what they've been saying over in my neck of the woods. And in terms of, wanting raises, it's always, well, it needs to be comparable. And so I guess I heard over in my neck of the woods in Craighead County, there's a consultant, I think maybe the same one, who's saying, you guys really need to think about raising your county employees' pay to the level of Washington County. And I'm thinking, well, I've heard that Washington County wants to raise theirs to keep up with who,
Yeah. Yes. Well, they compare us to the private sector. So we know that government cannot compete with the private sector in most all categories, if you will. Now, there are a lot of other benefits that go into that employment that I think make up for the actual compensation. The retirement's great, the medical insurance is great, but you know what I mean. So yeah, we're all keep trying to keep up with the Joneses and running a race that none of us can ever see the finish line to. So.
We're talking with Patrick Deakins. He's a Washington County Justice of the Peace. There's back on September 25th, a Northwest Arkansas editorial about mass transit. Now, you're mentioned in here. What can you tell us about that? It says here, quote, Justice of the Peace Patrick Deakins gave voice to the doubters, saying he could not justify the expense to the citizens of his rural district. What's the deal with mass transit?
So Northwest Arkansas as a region has had an interest in mass transit for a long time now. There's a lot of pressure on all the municipalities and the government, the county governments organizations to give money to our transit system over here is called Ozark Regional Transit, ORT. So, we're going through the budget. They're wanting more money, of course. If somebody comes to our budget meeting and wants less money, I'm going to give them a cookie and a star because this never happened before. So, anyways, they want more money. The problem that I see with that is I don't necessarily have any strong opinions about a mass transit system between the municipalities. If they want to do that, that's great. I think it needs to be sustainable. However, the problem with Ozark Regional Transit is they're trying to serve the rural parts of the county out here in Washington County. And the way they're doing that is they've come up with this system of on-demand service where if you need a ride into town, you can call them and schedule a special vehicle to come out and get you and bring you to your doctor's appointments or something like that. Now, listen, in a perfect world, that would be wonderful. It's just not sustainable, Paul. It's not feasible. It's not sustainable. And that's what I was asking Mr. Gardner with Ozark Regional Transit when they came and presented to our committee. I said, hey, this doesn't even seem feasible to me. Is this feasible? And his response basically to me was Washington County needs to decide whether or not they want transit. And my answer to that is thank you for being, honest with us. I don't want transit in the rural part of the county. It's just not feasible, so.
And what I think. See, this is why I really respect you, Patrick, because I think we're able to say, hey, they're in a perfect world, yeah, but we are in a world where we have a limited, finite number of resources, and it's not necessarily always a question of whether it's a good idea. There are a lot of good ideas, but can we actually afford it? And oftentimes the truth is no, we can't. And that's not an answer. A lot of times, people don't want to hear that.
Oh, absolutely not. And of course, I don't. I'm a big guy for liberty. I don't want to tell anybody where to live. I don't want to force anybody to do anything they don't want to. But there's benefits and consequences to where you live. If you want to live in the rural part of the county, there's services that are provided and there's services that are not provided out there, and that's just part of the decision process of making that decision of where you live. And I don't think that public transit should be into that equation at all. I mean, I think that's just a benefit that you're going to lose if you live in the rural parts of the county, and that's just my opinion on it. I'll be working with the other justices to I want to completely remove Washington County from its participation in Ozark Regional Transit just because I want them to be able to focus on their main mission, which should be mass transit in these cities. And I almost think we're doing them a disservice by, almost stringing them along, giving them a little bit of money every year, and funding this nonsensical and non-feasible rural service out here that I don't think it serves anyone well at all.
Yeah. Is it a lot of money?
It's not. In the grand scheme of things, it's a drop in the bucket. I think it's about $20,000 a year, and they want an increase of around $6,000 a year. But once again, I think we're doing a disservice to everyone because they say that service at that funding level that can't even serve the people anyways. They turn down calls all the time for the service, so it's just a failed system. So, I run into this a lot at budget too when people say, "Well, Patrick, why are you making a big deal out of this? This isn't very many dollars," and I think, well, we're death by 1,000 paper cuts at a certain point, where we can't do the things that we need to do, and everybody was looking for this big ticket item that we can save or cut. But I mean, it's all these little things that we're doing that are just nonsensical that I think if we took some appropriate action on some of those, we could maybe find some savings after a while if we had enough of those that would add up. If you will.
I completely agree. And you say, well, it's only $20,000 or whatever, but I completely agree with you. And what's frustrating from just somebody that observes what goes on in government, that argument that they make, well, it's only this much money, can be very effective. And it actually, I'm assuming, can kind of wear a public official down, because if you're just trying to save 20 grand and you've got people that are with each issue, 20 grand here, 30 grand there, but people come out and said, no, you can't take my piece of the pie. I mean, how many battles would you actually have? It's going to be exhausting. And I think that's kind of what they count on. And, that's why when Ronald Reagan said, once you create a program, it's like the closest thing to eternal life because it never goes away.
Absolutely, and it is exhausting, and I want the people to know that. Yeah, I mean, I talk to constituents all the time that'll point out particular things to me, and unfortunately, I have to tell them, yeah, we got to be sensible about this, though. We got to tackle this, the bigger fish first, or whatever we're wanting to have a battle on. You can't do it all at once, because here's what I see too with representative government. You can get a body together and they can say, yes, we're spending too much money. Yes, we need to cut this. We need to cut that. But there's somebody across the aisle or across that horseshoe that we sit on that's their pet project, if you will, for lack of a better word. That's what they really care about. They're very passionate about the Ozark Regional Transit or the 4-H or something like that. And so now you have a battle with that other person to win over enough justices to get that particular item funded or unfunded. So, yeah, it's an exhausting process. And once again, I know I always cheerlead this on your program, but people need to get involved because that does make a difference in how their representatives think and how they're going about their action.
The House, or I guess the state of Arkansas, they did pass an internet sales tax, and I have been kind of encouraging folks at the local level, like your quorum court level or the city council level, to start trying to dig into the numbers and try to figure out what kind of increase in revenue these local governments are going to be seeing, and to monitor it only to say, to not let it just get spent or thrown in somewhere, to actually say, we've got this increase, so maybe instead of a tax increase down the road to pay for this or that, maybe we take this new revenue coming in from the online internet sales tax and put it away so that we don't have to, raise a tax here or there. Are you concerned about this? I mean, have y'all been trying to monitor, what this increase is going to look like?
Yeah, we have, and unfortunately, we haven't really received very good information yet. We keep working with our treasurer, and what we keep getting is basically put off about, well, we haven't really seen final numbers roll in yet. It's been implemented, but it still goes through the state process, and they have to middleman it and hand it out to us. So we haven't received our first check, if you will. But yeah, listen, Paul. In general, to me, and I'm pretty sure Washington County is no different than anywhere else. This budget process, capitalization process, is completely broken. We've gone completely backwards of the way I think we should go about things in Washington County in this budget cycle. This is my first one. I'm a freshman on the court. But what we're doing is we're starting with expenses first. I think any of us in our private lives, we take our paychecks and then we plan our spending into what our revenue is. What we're doing on our end so far is we're passing all the budgets with all the expenses in it without a real good idea of what our revenue is going to look like next year, and I don't really foresee that being very sustainable. The second thing we've got to do is we've got to incentivize these department heads and these elected officials. I mean, the whole system is set up for them to grab as much money as they can in this chaotic process in the fall for the next year. I mean, there's no incentivization for them to say, I don't need as much money, I'm going to do without, I'm going to save money here. You know what I mean? There's no reason for them to do that. Why would you do that if your work is simpler and if it's easier to keep hiring, keep buying equipment, and all this kind of stuff? And yeah, the counties have to have some sort of process to put money back to fund for future capital investment. I mean, the jail overcrowding issue. We also have an issue with our radio communication systems we're going to have to replace. These are things that counties know are going to be issues in the future. They know that if their region's growing, they're going to need more services. They know that if the radio system's supposed to last 15 years when they buy it, that in 15 years they're going to have to replace it. And these counties need to start getting on some sort of planning cycle to put money back for these projects. Instead, I hate it every time, Paul. Every time something comes up that we need to replace, it's like then the conversation starts. Well, is it a sales tax or a millage increase? And it disgusts me and it makes me sick every time we have to get into that discussion.
You're exactly right. And on the radio front, I know for a fact in Northeast Arkansas, they're Jonesboro's facing the same thing. I couldn't help. I was at a breakfast place the other day, and you know what? I don't even think I could classify it as eavesdropping because the gentleman was just being too loud. And he was he was associated with the government in some way. I'm not going to go into how, but he was going off on this radio situation, saying we have known, that the radios are only going to be good for a finite amount of time. And so why in the world don't you start to plan 5 years before they go out? Go ahead and start, to plan and make, and yet there's just such a lack of foresight. And I think that has to do, you would never do that personally, to your point earlier, but it's just the tendency of men when they are in government. They don't look at it like they're spending and planning their own, with their own money. It's somebody else's, and so they don't really have to be as strict or disciplined.
Absolutely. And I want the people of Washington County to know, while death by 1,000 paper cuts on my end, it's going to be the same for them, and they need to start paying attention and looking at this process, because what I'm already hearing is you kind of hear these grumblings or these initial talks before like a real big push happens. And I think it's for people to try to get a feeling of where everyone is at in their minds on this issue. But there's already a lot of talk about the Washington County as a county can raise their millage, and that can be done by the quorum court without a vote of the people. They have 6 more mills that they could put on a property tax to increase it. And there's already talk about it. And one thing, the biggest argument I get is, if we raised that 6 mills, most people wouldn't even notice on their property tax bill. So why are we fussing around when we can just raise it? Most people won't say anything. And once again, I think that's a disgusting way to look at the people's money. And the one thing I've told, I was talking to a reporter the other day, and he was specifically talking to me about the radios because he knows I'm anti-tax. And so he was basically trying to, I think, feel me out and say, well, would you support that? It seems like the radios is a great endeavor, right? That's how they get you. That's pain point politics. This is what the first responders in the sheriff's department need. They need radios. Can't you support that? And what I told him was, I will never support a tax increase until I have seen that the government has spent our money as efficiently and as responsibly as possible, and they still don't have the money to take care of our first responders. But absolutely, that has not happened yet. And I don't think I've ever seen it demonstrated. We're not spending money responsibly. We're not spending money as efficiently as we could. And so by then, don't get me back into this corner about pain point politics, about helping out our sheriff's department. We need to find a way to get this done other ways if we're not doing what we need, or we're not acting responsibly in other areas.
Patrick Deakins, I appreciate it, folks. Listen to him. He's in local government, and if you, like he says, you should get involved too in your local government, because that's really where you can have a giant impact on big government versus smaller government. I mean, that's really what it's about. Patrick Deakins, it's always great, sir, to talk to you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Bye-bye.